Supercross still holds the #1 slot in my heart for motorsports that are actually fun to watch, but Supermoto is definitely my next favorite and closing fast. The unusual combination of dirt bike, flat track and pavement requires a very broad skill set, and necessarily, very specific bikes as well. Aprilia's Dorsoduro 750 is just such a bike, with elements from all three racing styles all mashed together for an entirely purpose-driven design. Given my affinity for this style of racing, I decided it was time to take a good look at this ride and see what all the factory has done to accommodate the dizzying array of demands placed on the bike by Supermotored Tracks. Designed the factory makes much of the fact that it worked closely with its race team to put together this ride. Even though the vast majority of these bikes will never see a race course, they are much more likely to pull duty as an urban shenanigan bike and are quite capable in that role as well. This bike is the epitome of the form follows function mentality, and since the designs within the sport are still in flux and have not yet completely gelled into a standard format, builders still have a lot in the way of artistic leeway to work with. What we wind up with is a sort of half-breed, street/dirt bike with a dirt-style bird's beak front fender, fly screen, cheek fairings, fuel tank and seat. But from that point down, the Dorsoduro quickly shows its street bike DNA with inverted front forks and slick street tires. Minimal body panels leave the trellis frame and engine clearly visible, and in general, the Dorsoduro keeps to the gazzer/bobber philosophy in that it's lean as a snake, with nothing of excess fat anywhere on the bike. Seat height approaches nosebleed altitudes at 34.2 inches tall, great for extreme lean angles, but for short inseams, not so much. The rider triangle seems to favor taller riders as well, with plenty of distance between the jockey mount footpegs, handlebars and seat, but this isn't exactly the kind of bike one shops by comfort and ease of use, is it? Chassis Aprilia set out to build the frame to provide strength at a light overall weight and balance rigidity with elasticity. To achieve this, it started with a modular frame that uses a tubular steel trellis upper frame with bolt-on aluminum members and a stressed engine that completes the skeleton. A removable subframe makes it easier to access the rear wheel and exhaust components. The steering rake is set at 26 degrees, and the trail is a trifle longer than I expected at 4.25 inches. Somehow I figured the trail would be something in the 3-inch range considering how agile the Dorsoduro is, but I suppose it isn't far off that mark, and one must consider the demands of multi-surface use, which introduces variables that change the normal equation. An aluminum swing arm works with an offset, coil-over monoshock for the rear suspension. A visually striking arrangement that leaves the shock well exposed to whirl and wrench, and adds to the already minimalist panache prevalent in the design. The shock comes with adjustable rebound damping and preload so you can dial in the ride, and 6.1 inches of travel so your innards can survive said ride. Likewise, the front suspension comes built with the expectation of hitting some rough terrain. Inverted, 43mm forks buoy and stiffen the front end and come with the same adjustments as the rear. I'm a little surprised Aprilia didn't spring for high and low speed compression damping as well, or at least a single speed compression damper for total control over the suspension, but it is what it is. Brakes on the Dorsoduro are all business with 4-pot, opposed piston calipers to bind the dual, wave-cut, 320mm discs. A single pot, piston and anvil caliper pinches the 240mm, wave-cut disc and back, and both ends benefit from a 2-channel, Continental ABS system. The factory-added aircraft-grade, braided brake lines that deliver accurate pressure and feedback with no losses due to hose flex for a little extra icing on the cake. Aluminum rims mount the 17-inch hoops, and the bike runs a 120/70 up front and a wide 180/55 in back. Drivetrain Aprilia stuffed its 749.9cc V90 into the frame to drive the Dorsoduro. This water-cooled, 90-degree V-twin runs dual overhead cams, 4 valve heads and a decidedly over-square bore and stroke at 92mm and 56.4mm, respectively. The factory also graced this mill with its second general, ride-by-wire system that manages and moderates the induction based on speed, gear, temperature and throttle control data. You can choose between 3 separate power delivery modes. Sport mode that delivers instant throttle response and unbridled power. Touring mode that still delivers full power but with a gentler roll-on, and rain mode with the softest delivery of all for adverse conditions and inclement weather. Unfortunately, the Aprilia Tri-Map system requires the throttle to be fully closed before switching modes, so you can't switch on the fly like you can on some other bikes. Not exactly a deal-breaker, but there it is. A stainless steel exhaust system runs through a channel in the subframe to keep the weight of those components as close to the center as possible, and the header pipes are routed to prevent rear shock fade due to excess heat transfer. A catalytic converter and lambda probe system help keep the emissions within regulated standards. The Dorsoduro mill punches above its weight with 60 pounds and 40 pence of torque at 4,500 rpm, and 92 ponies at 8,750 rpm, all on a bike that weighs in at just over 400 pounds, dry. Plenty of power for your particular brand of shenaniganery and hooligansy, whatever that may be. A 6-speed transmission crunches the gear ratios, and a chain drive makes the final connection to the rear wheel. Depending on the widely variable skill factor, you can expect to get something in the neighborhood of 12-second quarter-mile times at something around 110 miles per hour. Yeah, I know this isn't a drag bike, but the numbers should give you an idea of its capabilities all the same. Price: Aprilia barely breaks the $10K mark with a $10,299 MSRP on the Dorsoduro, placing it close enough to my entry-level cutoff for that slice of the market. This price gets you a 2-year, unlimited mileage warranty complete with 1 full year of roadside assistance through Road America, and the Dorsoduro can be headshot in red with black trim, white with red trim or white with yellow trim.